Today, we'll be talking about allergies. I guess a very important topic for all of us as parents, and especially when we are introducing solids. We have a very special guest with us today, Ayelet. She's based in New York, and she's specialized in the topic of allergies. She will tell a bit more about herself later. And today we also have Alex. Alex is also part of our crowdsourcing sort of group where we exchange around nutrition, we share recipes. So she's been also quite involved with Fieldful Flow. And we're very happy to have you, the two of you, today with us. And yeah, maybe Ayelet, you can introduce yourself.
Sure. So I just had to run out because one of my kids was making sound. So that's why I ended up coming to a new spot. I'm Ayelet. I'm a pediatric registered dietitian and mom living here in New York. I specialize in family nutrition as it relates to kids, eating habits, infant feeding, introducing foods, all that fun stuff. And I work with kids and families in private practice just to make it a little bit easier on the parents. It's a really stressful journey at times. And so it does indeed take a village. So I'm here just to kind of be a resource. So it's fun to just meet all kinds of people along the road. And I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you with us today, Ayelet. So maybe we can start talking about, okay, what should I pay attention to when starting on solids? So what are those foods that should be introduced at first? Can I introduce everything, or how is it?
Yeah. So generally speaking, with the high allergy foods, and so when we talk about those, we're talking about wheat, dairy, soy, eggs, nuts, fish. So those are the ones we're really thinking about when we think about the high allergy foods. And then recently, actually in the US, sesame was added as a major allergen as well. So these are the foods we think about when we think about what are like the real high risk food allergies. Children can certainly have allergies to other foods, but these are considered to be the most high risk for food allergy. So we actually want to introduce these pretty early and pretty often. Research does say that when we introduce on the earlier side, we actually reduce risk for developing food allergies later on. So this kind of protective mechanism starts after the 4-month-ish mark. So right around when we start solids, between 4 and 6 months, that's a good time to go ahead and introduce these allergens. There's no need to wait. In most cases, there certainly are exceptions for certain kids, but generally speaking, we introduce these early on. If we introduce too early, it's not very productive. So introducing before 4 months doesn't really do much, but getting it in kind of in that sweet spot between like the 4 and 12 month mark is shown to be very protective against developing food allergies later on.
Okay, maybe Alex, you can tell how was your experience? How did you actually introduce solids to your kid?
We did the baby-led weaning method. We started about 6.5 months, 7 months in that time frame, and we actually started out not knowing a whole lot. I introduced the very first meal. I introduced wheat, dairy, eggs, and peanuts all at the same time.
All in one. So
all at
brave.
once. Yeah, we ended up going to the emergency room because my son had hives all over his body a few hours later. So yeah, it was a very good learning experience for me, for any future children.
This is such a common, I mean, this happens a lot. And one of the recommendations is to try to space out these allergens for exactly that reason, right? We're all so excited to give our kids food and we're just like, take it, please. Anything you want to eat is great. And so that's so common, Alex. This happens a lot. So generally what I recommend is to try to space it out by 3 days if you can in between. So with each new high allergy food, give it 3 days in between just to make sure there's no reaction. And then you're good to go. And then you can continue introducing the next food. For other foods, I don't really think this 3-day rule need apply. But for those riskier foods, I would say 3 days in between each.
Yeah, actually, I did that. I was a little bit of a nerd, I guess. I took a couple of courses. I was reading a lot because I wanted to do baby-led weaning too, and I wasn't sure how to do it. And I did that with the 3 days, and it worked out pretty well. We were lucky, and Lucy and my son didn't have any allergies. But I did everything before the 8 months. So I introduced peanuts, fish, milk, everything. So it
Right.
worked out pretty well. And yeah, so from my experience, I guess you mentioned before that for some kids, it's maybe not such a good idea to introduce everything from the beginning. But I guess because in my family we didn't have any allergies,
Mm-hmm.
so I wasn't so afraid to do it. But I guess that's what you meant before, that maybe you have
Yeah,
some, I don't know, experiences in your family with allergies, so you should be more careful.
that's a great point. So actually, when we think about families that have allergies, more commonly, we actually still want to go ahead and introduce the food early because we want that protective mechanism, right? We want to protect them from developing the allergy later. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee that there won't be allergies, but there's no indication to hold off on introducing those foods because someone else in the family has the food allergies. If, for example, you have a baby who, say, had a milk protein allergy and couldn't tolerate standard infant formula, or required mom to be on food elimination during breastfeeding, that's the kind of baby that I would say for dairy, for example, I would hold off a little bit longer and introduce closer to a year rather than the 6-month mark. Um, and maybe a child who has shown that they have allergies to other foods previously, we might want to be cautious when introducing other highly allergenic foods as well. But generally speaking, for most of the population, that works. Getting it in there, whether it's like really at the 6-month mark or at the 8-month mark. Yeah, generally speaking, we want to go ahead and introduce.
Okay, and how should we actually do it? So
Yeah.
I guess it depends on whether I do baby-led weaning or not. And so maybe I can tell you a bit how I did it, and you maybe can add on that, depending on your experience, Ayelet, as an expert, and you,
Yeah.
Alex, as a mom. So in my case, I gave Lucian, because we did baby-led weaning, but I wasn't so strict. So I tried to sometimes also combine other textures and things, because I always thought it was important to show him everything. So with peanuts, I guess I just did it with butter, peanut butter. I read somewhere that you could put a little bit of peanut butter here on the lip or so. So I think I did that at first because I was a little bit afraid with peanuts. But it worked out well, and then I was always using peanut butter for everything, for pancakes and yeah, many things. Also, I mixed it with everything for the pancakes, and yeah, I started exploring different recipes and things. With fish, it was the last. With I think it was shrimp. It was the last one because I didn't have the time to look for shrimp. We didn't cook shrimp often at home, so when I had the opportunity, I just bought the shrimps, and my husband did something really. He's a chef, so he was creating a special dish for Lucian with avocado, and it was kind of a ceviche or I don't know what with lemon. So this was the first time, but he tried already many things. So that's why I combined shrimp with other flavors, because in the beginning, of course, you try to give things separate that they learn. So the flavor, I guess, of things. So, but in this case, I did it like that, and it worked out pretty well. And he, I mean, it didn't happen anything. I don't remember the others, to be honest. So I remember these two very well. I guess the others were just, so here's your bread, eat it.
Yeah, Alex, how did you get fish in? How did you introduce fish?
I think we did salmon, and so I just kind of like gave like little fish fingers and let him gnaw on that. And he did fine. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it depending on your style and depending on how you eat, right? So, for example, in my house, there would never be a fancy dish with lemon and avocado and shrimp. It just would never happen. It sounds great, but it would just never happen. So we have to do things that are consistent with what you are eating, right? So, I think there's really a whole spectrum of ways to do this. Certainly, purees work very well. You can absolutely puree pretty much anything. So, for babies who are doing purees, you can certainly puree a fish. You can puree some peanut butter into something like applesauce or pear sauce. You can mash it with a banana. Sometimes I even like to just use peanut oil, the oil that's on top of the peanut butter jar. You can add it into yogurt, into cottage cheese. So you can definitely use the soft textures really with a lot of, there's a lot of versatile ways to use that. Another way to do it is actually to use something like peanut butter puffs, like a Bamba or a Puffworks, and crunch it or like crinkle it into something like yogurt or an applesauce so that you get little texture that way too. And then when it comes to something like dairy, right, we want to introduce dairy products that we hold off on regular milk. So you can definitely introduce yogurt, cottage cheese, shredded cheese. You can melt cheese into things. You can cook it into eggs. You can mash scrambled eggs. You can do pieces of omelet, right? So we don't want babies drinking whole milk until about 12 months, but you can go ahead and introduce dairy in other ways as well.
And I remember with yogurt, I was a little bit cautious. I waited a little bit longer. I don't know why, because I guess I read that some people said, okay, you should wait a little bit longer, or with cheese, or so I wasn't sure. I asked my pediatrician here in Colombia. I'm actually based in Hamburg, but right now I'm in Colombia because my family is from Colombia. And of course, it depends on where you are, what people say. And and my pediatrician told me, no, it's fine. You can give him a little bit. So, but I waited until I think he was 7 months old or something. And yeah, it was fine. And then I started, progressively introducing other things like cheese. And when he was 1, I introduced whole milk, of course.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a good point. There's so many cultural differences in introducing solids to begin with, or how we feed babies anyway. And we often, we get nervous and we think, well, is this the right month? Is this the right texture? And then we just have to remember, in another country, it's a completely different system. So there isn't really one way. There's really just the way that works for you and your family and your baby. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that there's just so many different things happening in different places. And so even if you feel like, oh, I didn't get it all in by month 9, or I wanted to get it in month 10, but I got it in month 11, it's okay. Babies are really dynamic like that. They actually don't mind when we make changes. So I think that cultural piece is really important too.
And what should we actually do in case of a reaction? I mean, you, Alex, you know better. I mean, you went to the hospital, but I guess, I don't know, like, what should you pay attention to, which signs or something? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Alex, what did you notice first?
My husband actually noticed when he was changing his diaper that he had a rash on his belly. And so we kind of looked at everything else, and it was kind of widespread all over his midsection. And so we kept watching it, and it, over the next like 10 minutes, it progressed and was spreading like into his legs and arms. And so we said, okay, this is happening fast. Something's wrong. So we should probably go get him checked out.
Yeah. I mean, that's very common. A rash is very common. Certainly anything that makes you worry, like lethargy, your child looks really fatigued or tired all of a sudden, doesn't have the same amount of energy. If their color changes significantly, these are things that you definitely want to keep an eye on and make sure you're in touch with either a pediatrician, or if you're feeling nervous, go ahead and go straight to the emergency room. Certainly a lot of vomiting or diarrhea is something that we want to keep an eye on as well and speak to your doctor about. But really, allergies can present in a lot of different ways. And so just looking at your kid, you know best, right? If something doesn't seem right, then something's probably not right. So yeah, so rash, lethargy, looking really pale, looking really low energy, a lot of vomiting, a lot of diarrhea. These are the main symptoms, but just know your child best. So just go ahead and talk to your doctor if you're worried.
And I've heard with peanuts, for example, can be even worse, that you can breathe, or I don't know. What should you do in that case? That this develops very quickly, and I don't know.
Yeah, that's something that you would want to call you want to call emergency for. So 911 here, depending on where you're located, just to make sure that you get immediate attention for that.
Okay, and do you have any more things that we should consider? I mean, that you think are important to consider? Yeah, in relation to allergies, maybe that's something that we are missing.
So it's such a wild world, and the research really is new and exciting. And I think every few years or even less, new guidelines come out. So working with someone like a dietitian is helpful, just to keep track of what's going on out there. And we all go through kind of this stressful, rocky road of feeding our babies, and so I really just want everyone to feel confident and feel empowered that you know your baby, and you get to choose the style in which you feed your baby, and you get to decide what they eat, which is really fun. So even though there's a little bit of worry and stress involved, try to put it aside every once in a while and just kind of enjoy the road.
Yeah, I think it's very important what you mentioned about being responsive and always paying attention to your child's cues, because I mean sometimes we read a lot, we hear many things, and it's so common that I mean like that you get worried, you aren't sure if you're doing the right thing, and especially in this important topic of allergies, because of course you want your baby to be fine, and you don't want to give him anything that could yeah, harm him. Yeah, I guess this is, yeah, key here. Just pay attention to your child's cues. Believe in yourself, I think, is also important. I also, I mean, in the beginning, I was a little bit too stressed, and I wanted to research everything. I wanted to read a lot. I mean, it's of course important to read, to take
Mhm.
courses and everything, but yeah, maybe to slow down a little bit too. It's important. And do you have maybe, in case your baby has, I don't know, I think it's very common with eggs, when in your case, Alex, because sometimes you don't know how to change recipes, or I know that from a friend of mine who couldn't join today, because she's always asking me, I don't know what to cook for him, he cannot eat anything. And so if you have any recommendations, just to, I mean, how's been your process cooking for your child, what's been helpful for you? I think other mothers and parents in general could learn from your experience.
Yeah, it was a learning experience for me, because I've always loved eggs, and eggs are in everything. It seems like. So I did the research and found that bananas are a good replacement for eggs. So if you're making things like pancakes or French toast, bananas are really good to use. Or silken tofu is also good, which adds a little extra protein if you don't have any, issues with tofu, any soy issues. And then for things like baking, it can be tough because things get very dense without an egg. And so I found that using vinegar will help. And so using a little bit of vinegar, especially if a recipe already has baking soda or baking powder, it creates a chemical reaction to give that rise. So if you're making muffins or a cake or something like that, using a little bit of vinegar actually helps quite a bit. So.
Okay, and I've heard also about, I forgot the name, the water of chickpeas, I think. How is it called? Uh,
Yep. Aquafaba. Aquafaba. Yep. And
I learned
then
that recently. I didn't know about that.
yeah. Yeah. And then
Okay, have you
flax
tried
as well.
that?
I haven't tried that. No, I haven't tried it
Me
before.
neither. Me neither. We have like Sophia. She's also part of our co-creation team, and she's also Alex. Maybe you saw her a couple of times, also sharing her experience and things on our WhatsApp group. And she uses a lot that I just had actually a message from my friend Clara, the one who wanted to join. We're almost over, but I think it's good that she joins and maybe tells a little bit about her experience with her allergies, because I guess all journeys are different. So let's see if she makes it. She just wrote a couple of seconds ago. Um, so I guess there are many ways to cook. I mean, to replace things that we can use if our babies have allergies. We are trying to put together many tips for you. This will be available on our website, which hopefully will be available very, very soon. And here is Clara, and maybe she can tell us her experience. Let's see. Clara, hi. Can you hear us? Let's see if she replies. I'm not sure. Okay, so I'll just keep telling you a little bit about these tips that we are putting together. So I guess sometimes it's just difficult to find the ways, but I think actually cooking for your child is so nice. I mean, I wasn't really, I always liked cooking, but I guess when I had I had my child, uh, everything kind of got I don't know, more important for me. So I started trying new things, recipes, because before him, my husband was the one who was cooking all the time. So and before I met my husband, I was cooking a little bit, but yeah, I think it's so nice when you can try out new things. And I guess if your child has an allergy, this shouldn't be actually an impediment for you to try out new things and maybe explore ways that work for you. In my case, I like to cook things that are easy. I'm not such a I don't know, I don't like to be the whole morning cooking. I know some people enjoy it a lot, but in my case, I'm not really this kind of person. I don't know for you, how is Alex? I think you do enjoy that, don't you?
I do enjoy cooking. Yeah. Lately, I noticed that I am making recipes and meals that are a little shorter on time because having a toddler running around is distracting. So they get into everything.
Yeah, I think sometimes this is so hard when you're trying to cook, and I mean, I think it's nice to cook together with them, but when they're in this age, my child's also almost 2.5, and he always wants to take everything, and I'm afraid that he's gonna just take a knife, and my husband had all this set of knives which are super sharp, and I'm like always, oh no. I'm not so patient, to be honest. So my husband is a little bit more, and he doesn't care, and he lets him do everything. But I'm okay, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Clara, can you?
we have to remember that even though it sounds awesome to have like these good recipes and meals, the easier the better when it comes to kids, because that's all they need, right? They just need basics. So we don't need to create a 4-course fancy meal. We just have to keep it pleasant. And so I find that when I'm trying to follow a recipe, I get so frustrated and I'm like, can't find this, I can't find that, I can't get it out on time for dinner, everyone's hungry. Um, so these days I cook kind of the bare basics and it still works, right? You can still introduce flavor and seasoning and switch things up a little bit and offer new foods without having to feel like you really have to cook anything very fancy.
Yeah, so yeah, that's true. So I think like for introducing all these allergens is also, I mean, you also can do it in a very simple way with real food. For example, with vegetables, put a little bit of peanut butter on it, or with bananas, yogurt, and as you said before, Ayelet, sprinkle some, I don't know, nuts or something. In my case, I've seen that Lucian likes simpler things. So when we make very elaborate things, he gets a little bit scared. Okay, so is there anything else that you would like to add? Maybe Alex, anything else that you would like to tell us about your experience?
Not really. We're just waiting for him to outgrow his egg allergy. He has outgrown his peanut allergy, so that is good. But yeah, it's just.
That's a good point. Maybe
Mhm.
to finish our conversation today, Ayelet, how long takes this? So it depends. So, or is there a time frame? Yeah, I'm not sure how it works,
Yeah.
to be honest, because
So it really depends on the child, and it could potentially depend on if there's therapy involved, like if they're doing some methods for exposure with an allergist, or it really, I think it really depends on the child and the allergy itself. Each probably has a different answer to that.
okay. So, but there are like things that you can do to maybe improve these allergies, or aren't they?
So depending on what you're doing with your allergist, there are certain foods or certain circumstances where small exposure that are very controlled with the allergist could potentially help outgrow an allergy. It doesn't always work, but it's definitely worth talking to a pediatric allergist about, to see if your child is a candidate for that.
Okay, let's try the last time because Clara's been trying to connect, but something is not working well. Clara, are you there? I I think she's there. Okay, I think it's not working. Okay, that's a pity. That we can learn about her experience. But thank you so much, Alex. Thank you, Gillette. I think it was great. I mean, at least to have an idea of what to pay attention to, what to do in case of an allergy. Don't be afraid to introduce things early on, and in case of that your family or your husband had any allergies, so maybe be a little bit more cautious. And yeah, is there anything else? No, I think I mentioned most of things. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I
Bye-bye.
hope you have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.